Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a short hiatus, but it is great to be back once again. 983 Media and FAB Cards combine to bring you our second installment of the Goliath Gauntlet Flesh and Blood Invitation. I am Mitch Leslie here, joined by Flake the man. Of course, it's your birthday today, by the way, and what a way to celebrate it by jumping into the second installment of, this project we sort of came up with together a few months back, and I don't know if we even imagined we'd be here for a second one, but the response was so great last time, we thought, it's so nice, let's do it twice.
Well, that's it. It's like a silly idea that we had that came together, and ultimately here we are down the line, and it is somewhat successful. And that is how I was born, and the idea of my birthday, frankly. But there's also the Goliath Gauntlet, frankly, which is just as pretty damn cool. And I got to say, yes, it's a wonderful birthday party that we're going to have here, because we get to kick off another Goliath Gauntlet tournament. The first one, I don't want to say took the world by storm, but we got to say that the outcry of just support from the community has been immense. And I want to thank the players. I want to thank our sponsors, obviously LSS and for sure FAB Cards. But here we are for another go around.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about sort of all the people that have sort of come together to make this quite special. So let's start by talking about the players, because the premise of our Goliath Gauntlet Invitational Flake is that we take some of the best well-known players from around the Flesh and Blood world, these matchups that you kind of dream to see at like a Pro Tour world, and we just slam them in a bracket, and we have them play off for our enjoyment, essentially. This time around here in our Goliath Gauntlet number 2 Electric Boogaloo, we have some fantastic matchups. We have a lot of returning faces from our previous Goliath Gauntlet, right? MajiinBae and DMAmada are actually facing off later today in a rematch of last Goliath Gauntlet's finals. Remember that MajiinBae managed to take that away and become the champion. Hayden Dale returns, Michael Hamilton, Matthew Rogers returns, Tariq Patel comes back. We've got some new names in the mix, which is just as exciting, Clay.
Well, the names that are coming back, I mean, we'd be hard pressed to find any excuses not to bring back DMArmada and MajiinBae. I think that the fact that they kind of fell off and are in the quarterfinals is quite fascinating. That a lot of these matchups have just kind of become dream matchups themselves. But, putting to bed from the previous Goliath Gauntlet, some of the concerns were like, well, are content creators really that competitive? Dude, they absolutely are. As we saw it, people like DMArmada make it all the way to the finals. People like MajiinBae, also another content creator, making it all the way to the finals. So that just kind of opened the door to inviting a lot more fascinating personalities and just great contributors to the culture of this game. So I'm so stoked to see what the spice is. I know that I've gotten a lot of messages when we invited some of these players saying it was a dream to them. It was like getting an Oscar nomination to some of these people. They were just so thrilled to be a part of it, and it inspired them to try new things. So we're going to see some new spice in this tournament as well, but I'm not going to spoil that until those matches are on the screen.
Yeah, look, a great chance to get a good look at what the Dynasty meta is shaping up to look like. Obviously, we've had some battle hardened, and we're right in the midst of ProQuest season, so we're starting to see some trends emerge. But here's a great opportunity to see some of your favorite, most celebrated players from all around the world show what they've taken away from the newest set in Flesh and Blood and have put together to show us in this invitational. Let's talk pricing, Flake. Big shout out, of course, to FAB Cards for coming in clutch. $3,000 is our prize pool, but that's not all. Of course, as per usual, there will be a special playmat commemorating your champion of the Goliath Gauntlet. Big shout out to Mara Faris, of course, of Blackwing Studio. She'll be providing a fantastic, I've seen it already, fantastic Goliath Gauntlet altar card. So a big shout out to Blackwing Studios there. And big shout out to Legend Storage Studios providing a PCG graded gold foil Goliath Gauntlet card inscribed with Goliath Gauntlet 2 champion. There's a lot on the line. There's a lot more on the line than last time. And we've got the perfect cohort of players to demonstrate that. Let's talk about our first matchup here. We have a returning face in Hayden Dale going up against a newer face here on the Goliath Gauntlet, but one that's really well known around the Flesh and Blood community. It's Hayden Dale going up against Peter Buddensiek.
Yeah, Peter Buddensiek is maybe not as well known, obviously, as somebody of Hayden Dale's ilka, but both of them have podcasts. Both of them have contributed to the conversation, the dialogue of the meta, especially now into the Dynasty era, which is where we're at. This is going to be one of those first major, snapshots of what people are going to do when the chips are down, when you've got to rely on one deck to get you through, and one loss means you're out of it. Seeing what they're brewing up is going to be important. Peter Buddensiek is part of Team Kayfabe. He's an incredible player. He practices and tests with some of the best in the world. And obviously there's Hayden Dale, an Australian champion, somebody who has won a calling before, somebody who is just out there crushing it. Now, do those fires still burn? He hasn't necessarily won anything big in a while, but you know that the hunger still stands there. This is not shade thrown at Hayden. I'm not trying to do that.
It's a narrative. You're already spinning a narrative. But I will say that Hayden is ranked, I think, 5th or 6th in Limited in the entire world. He was like 6-0 in Limited, I think, at Worlds. And then I think in Nationals or before, it was like 5-1. So incredible Limited player. But this guy's a real deal. He made day 2 at PT Lille. Again, at Worlds, he was shown on camera with some fantastic moments. He had a really good performance at Worlds as well. I know he's been testing a lot. It's ironic because Hayden loves Reinhard, but he tends to get captured on camera getting absolutely demolished by Reinhard. That's kind of his legacy so far. But I want to quickly call out Peter, because obviously he's a member of the Team Kayfabe Cards Pro team. He's one of the players that I think really was the first to figure out just how disgusting Fire could be. And that was actually back during the sort of Stubby Hammerers era, where Fire was almost operating like a bit of a combo deck. So really excellent player. He's a guy who actually tests with a local SoCal team called The Experience. Obviously, guys like Chrissy Ali, who's in this tournament, and Tyler Horspool. So some serious players. Both of these guys ready to give it all. And I'm really excited about this matchup because Peter, let's talk about him first. He's known for his Fire play, but he's also a little bit of a pocket Kano player, and he's bringing his pet deck along to the Goliath Gauntlet Flake. Let's have a look at this list because it's great. I'm very excited for it. Those familiar with Kano recognize a lot of pieces of this, I'm sure. Honestly, the guys from Arsenal Pass, Sasha Markovic, Alexander Vore, Hayden, Brendan, worked on to a great degree as well, right? It's predicated on like the big Aether Wildfire turn with, a spell in the middle, multiple Metacarpus Node activations, and then finishing an opponent off with Blazing Aethers. So Hayden will be extremely familiar with this deck list because he just released like a masterclass, sort of a complete guide to Kano on the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. But again, this is something that Peter's really comfortable playing here. This is the kind of deck that really can be hard to follow. So we look forward to sort of talking you through the lines because it's really spicy. It's very exciting to see.
It is an exciting list. And the thing about Kano, especially when you are unfamiliar with it, is you always think that you're safe. You have I've got 30 plus life. I'm presenting lethal. That's it. Well, that is the beauty of this, is the fact that a very adept Kano player can just pull it out of their ass at any point. It's kind of like a rabbit out of the hat to certain degrees. And again, the amount of times I've died to Kano in the early parts of my career here in Flesh and Blood was usually by presenting lethal and just doing one of these and saying, all right, what you got? And then all of a sudden a little hocus pocus and you are dead. And then the L is nice and fat on your record. So the beauty, like you mentioned about Hayden Dale's familiarity, is he knows where that cushion is. He knows what the reach is and just how far a Kano can reach to go ahead and snatch that W away from you. Because when you're presenting lethal at 38 health, but that Kano has an opportunity to pitch all those wildfires, those blazing aethers, and have the resource for it, you're as good as done. So Hayden Dale is probably going to be very protective of the life total and very, very defensive in this matchup, because once those blazing aethers start to stack, it is insane the sheer ceiling that you can bust through to snatch a game away.
Yeah, your floor's like 22 damage with a full Kano combo. That requires a lot of setup, though. You need about like 12 to 13 resources to really pop off with it. And that's not taking into account your opponent's Arcane Barrier. So let's look at the other side of the table here. For those that remember our first Goliath Gauntlet, Hayden Dale ran straight into Isaac Crute on a Briar list and got absolutely demolished. He's back now with a Briar list of his own, one that I know he's worked on quite a lot. I think it was it PT Lille that Hayden's and his compatriots actually brought a Briar list. They thought it was really, really powerful, the sort of stuff that they could do with it here. So a couple key cards I want to point out here, which I really enjoy. There's Smash and Good Time, which could be interesting against the Kano. Don't know how relevant it will be. A lot of Briar decks have gone away, Flake, from using Amulet of Earth in the past. It's been brought in here by Hayden, and I love it because it's so crucial on Force of Nature turns, right? Being able to buff every attack action card for the whole turn when there's effects that say like, okay, if your attacks are hitting at higher than their base power, you get to draw a card, is big. For all other intents and purposes, it's a pretty classic Briar Shell, the kind of deck that develops Channel Mount Heroic and strikes fear into the hearts of their opponents.
And there's so many combat tricks into this deck where you never feel like what you're blocking is precisely what you're getting. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this. There's going to be a lot of, well, what you're presenting to me, I know there's some more nastiness. You got a pair of lightning presses here as well. Things like Exude Confidence are in there as well, and they're so effective against certain lists. Now, it's not really going to get you anywhere necessarily against Kano. What I think this list is going to look like is it's going to be a lot of just full gas, because if you find that magical hand early and you're pressing against Kano won't have the time necessarily to go ahead and find the resources, perhaps play the play the E-Pots onto the board. This is a list that wants to go tall and end it potentially in 2 turns. This could be a very short game, and with the on-hit triggers, the card draw, how you go, and just it might be a matter of, if we shorten the game, if I take this to 2 turns and just go full gas and not worry about your arcane barrier or about your arcane damage coming my way, I'm sort of letting this up to the RNG gods, where if you do eventually have to pop the Stormies or try to burn me down, it's going to take a pretty effective shuffle to find every piece lined up and all the dominoes to fall the way I want them to.
I hope we see the card Explosive Growth from Hayden here, because there's a couple cheeky things you can actually do with that card to get full value out of it. I won't mention until it comes up, because it might be me taking 10 minutes to talk about something that's entirely superfluous. So, let's get our Goliath Gauntlet Flesh and Blood Invitational number 2 underway. Our first match is going to be Peter Buddensiek on Kano going up against Hayden Dale on Briar.
Look at that. I love these playmats as well. It looks like a...
this is an homage.
I was going to say, it looks like a subway station in New York. There's so much like the graffiti and art going on. It's very beautiful here. And also Peter Buddensiek coming in with that Marvel Kano. And is that a gold foil Crucible too?
Yeah, quite possible. This guy is absolutely blinged out. That is pretty insane. Oh, I like this big time. Okay, so this is the first turn of the game here. So Peter is actually going to Crucible that Lessons in Lava. So he wants to just sort of set up the top of his deck here. Maybe get a card up there that he really would like to see. I think because Hayden Dale has Spell Void 2 with those Shock Charmers, right? Which means that you can just pop them to cover up 2 arcane damage for free. Plus Crown of Dichotomy here. Peter needs to chip damage at Hayden to get him to a range where he can actually kill him with all this sort of defensive setup, and Hayden knows this matchup. So Peter hitting with this, he does 3 arcane damage. So that means that he can search his deck for a wizard card with cost equal or less than the damage dealt by Lesson on Lava. So he just gets another Lesson on Lava off the top.
Well, like we mentioned earlier, Hayden Dale is no stranger to this particular matchup, having probably played it or against it easily dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And so he knows what the reach is. He knows what the setup is as well. And as you can see here, he's not worried necessarily about taking damage here, because his game plan is to sort of try to get Peter to a position where he's either blocking with cards that he needs for the combo, or he's going to have to pull the trigger on his own combo and sort of cross his fingers to actually cross the finish line. Hayden Dale's deck is meant to go wide and tall and get nasty. What Hayden needs here right now is he needs to find cards like Channel Mount Heroic. He needs to get that setup turn. So there is very much potential here, Uber, for if Hayden manages to scoop a Channel Mount Heroic on turn 0 or turn 1 rather on his turn, it could completely end in one foul swoop. Peter Buddensiek might have a situation where he just commits all of his cards to block and Hayden just goes to town on him.
Now, it's a Tome of Aetherwind being thrown to the top of the deck here. So this means that on the next turn, Peter might choose to use his action point simply just to play the Tome, be able to draw a couple of cards. Off the top, he wants to play it on this turn. He actually has the extra card to pitch to it. So this is great for turn 0. Peter's chipping a lot of damage. Hayden only has Arcane Barrier 1. He can only stop a maximum of 1 arcane damage per non-attack action that comes his way. So Peter's getting 3 damage here against Hayden, who really can't do too much about this. He just says, okay, well, I mean, I try and stop as much of this damage as I possibly can. So Peter's getting 3 damage, and he's basically taken that starting life deficit of 10 life down to 5, making it a bit more comfortable and a bit easier to get Hayden to sort of critical life here. This is a great opening, but it does mean that Peter's used 2 of his key tutor cards in Lesson of Lava already.
I think by just making some headway towards that goal of getting Hayden into that that wheelhouse of being able to do some damage here. Now Hayden coming through with that is a Bramble Spark red. It's going to get the fusion, so it's going to get +3 the arcane damage. I don't think Peter is at all concerned about this kind of stuff. It's more so the damage that's going to basically be thrown his way. This Ravenous Rabble couldn't see what it found. But with the +3, it looked like it actually whiffed hard. It looked like it was a blue on top. 5 go again. 1 arcane is going to be thrown towards Peter's way. Hayden Dale already sort of feeling like he's playing against a Rhinar again, where all of the RNG is not happening. He peeling a blue off the top with a fused Bramble Spark is not how you want this to start.
Exactly. Not what Hayden's hoping for. It's the low roll of Ravenous Rabble. There's obviously a bit of a luck element to that. Getting 5 arcane damage and 1 arcane damage and a ping of 5 damage here. It looks like we've had a pitch to arcane damage here, arcane barrier rather. So Peter's able to cover that up, and then he blocks 3, so he's taking 2 in total. Peter has 2 resources still floating here. Hayden has go again though, so still more for this turn that can be done. A Rosetta Thorn follow up into an arsenal might be reasonable here. Hayden thinking about how many cards he really wants to spend here, and he's worried about maybe getting arcane damage coming his way as well.
I think that he's basically like Hayden to me, I think has just been, his plan is to just sort of burn Peter to the ground as fast as possible. The arcane damage is going to be pitched his way is kind of not that worrisome. I like the picture of the blue. So 2 and 2 is what the damage is presented towards him. So it's the arcane's going to come through. The option to block the physical is still there, but 2 floating resources means that, well, if you do want to throw some arcane at me, I've got some float that I can deal with. But it's loading up the arsenal here and perhaps sort of matching Peter's next turn with a 5-card hand is the right move, in my opinion. You have to sort of stack the deck and you have to go feast or famine. I have to go 5-card hand into perhaps a lower situation, but I need to threaten your life total. So at a certain juncture, I may have a 4-card hand, and if I just throw an attack at you that presents lethal, you're gonna have to pop off, and I may have some resources to absorb some of that arcane.
This is on Peter's turn, if I'm not mistaken here. So he's going to be able to play this Aether Flare here, as Gazy Aegis came off the top, which is pretty big. If he plays it, he can then get access to it. But Aether Flare, of course, is kind of like a mini Wildfire. Again, it's, does a bit of arcane damage there. And then the next card that he plays with an effect that deals arcane damage, instead deals that much arcane damage plus X, or X is the damage dealt by Aether Flare. So it's a red Aether Flare with a Crucible of Aether Weave buff. So this is for 4. And then the next attack would come in for X plus 4. Hayden is thinking about it. He almost reached for Spell Void there on those Shock Charmers. So Gazy Aegis gets played off the top, which allows Peter to opt. And then when it resolves, Gaze goes into Peter's hand, fueling further Kano activations, just like this.
Shock Charmers, if it's meant for anything, it's going to be meant for that Aether Wildfire. In this case, it's another Aether Flare coming right after that one.
7 arcane. I mean, Hayden just takes it, says, I've not really got too much choice. He knows right now that Peter, unless there's, anything else for him, Peter doesn't have an Aether Wildfire established in Arsenal. He's not in sort of combo range. There isn't anything in Arsenal yet. So Hayden knows he has some time. Embodiment of Earth here set to pop, giving Kano a sort of priority window, a chance to, perform movements at instant speed. He chooses not to. So here comes Hayden. I mean, this is very scary. You are lower life than the Kano at 24 now. And this Gorganian Tome is going to net Hayden a card and half of an Embodiment of Lightning.
Well, that is by design, Uber, because when you're lower life, that Scar for a Scar does so many wonderful things. It gets the free go again. Obviously, Hayden would probably prefer to be at 40 here, but Peter has already put in a significant amount of work here. And yeah, it's worth noting here that the popping of the Embodiment of Earth token is incredibly it's incredibly important because it gives a window to the opposing wizard player who can, respond to it. Sometimes, when you're playing something like a Guardian and you have a Seismic Surge that pops against an Icelander, that is the worst thing that can happen. It's terrible. It's a very, very dangerous thing. In this case, Hayden Dale doesn't have an option. The Embodiment of Earth just happens. And here you can see Hayden Dale's kind of doing the first calculations. Now, keep in mind, a Gorganian Tome has been played. That's like half of a go again. It's the follow-up here that Hayden has to navigate very correctly. And Hayden might actually be calculating, do I have an option to get Peter down to perhaps 0, but this is a good start. Channel Mount Heroic is on the board. That is the first domino. That is the major first sort of domino that needs to fall for things to go bad for Peter. And it's the recipe you need to start approaching even a chance to have victory, because Hayden Dale at 24 against the Kano is a significantly dangerous place to be.
So this is a lightning surge that would normally have a go again if played from Arsenal. It wasn't, but because Hayden's played 2 non-attack actions this turn, it has go again care of the embodiment of lightning, which Hayden's sort of a shortcut. He didn't really represent that. Or he actually had the token on board. So this is nice. It means Hayden's got more to do this turn. Peter doesn't want to respond normally to the activation, to the popping of the embodiment of Earth. He wants Hayden to empty his hand a little bit to make it harder for Hayden to sort of, eat up this damage. Now, this E-Strike is potentially and draw at this stage. No, okay, it's going to be coming in for 10. Hayden says, I value the extra damage here over being able to draw a card and pop it in my arsenal. So E-Strike for 10, no go again, is on deck.
Well, and I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that you don't know what you're drawing off the top. What happens if you draw something like an Autumn's Touch off the top? You don't want an Autumn's Touch in your arsenal, and you don't want to hang on to it in your hand either. So I think that just getting the damage where it's presented is the right move here, because you're going to put Peter potentially to a spot where he might go down to 9, and 9 damage, that with a Channel Mount Heroic on the board, that's 2 attacks. That's 2 very basic, simple attacks that will present lethal to Peter in this case. So I do like this move. I think Hayden Dale understands that those extra points of damage are going to be so vital. And if you draw garbage that you need to stick into the arsenal, that can be backbreaking. It's as if you just gave away 2 free points of damage.
And a word to all the aspiring Wizard players out there. Kano does, in fact, block. There are tons of Wizard cards that have 3 block, and it's important to preserve your life total to give you time. Ideally, Peter wants to get to a 3rd turn, so he has a tunic counter. That extra resource is pretty big. And this is the Tome of Aetherwind here. This is Peter opting to use his action point on his turn in order to do this. Again, cards is great. Having blue to pitch to Kano, we can definitely force cards out of the hand of Hayden here. So that's an Eye of Ophidia. Again, he's proxied it. And it's great that Peter sort of draws it here, because if you Kano ability and it's an Eye of Ophidia off the top of your deck, your turn ends. You cannot play that card off the top. You cannot Kano any further. It completely bricks you. So Peter's just getting that out of the way here. Being able to opt is pretty big off the Eye of Ophidia to see what's on top. That will inform him of his next Kano activation target. And he hit the Aether Spinner, which also has a built-in opt. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes for this here. And Flake, this is big. 5 damage Aether Spindle means you opt X, where X is the damage dealt by Aether Spindle. Peter can set up his entire next turn, essentially, in terms of draws.
Oh, significantly so. And then Hayden Dale understands that those Shock Charmers are destined for the Aether Wildfire. Like, that is what you want to be, basically, that's what you want to be stuffing when it comes down to, Spell Void. And what can you do here? The tough part here is Hayden, if he wants to stop any of this damage, has to commit a card. And I think Hayden understands that if he wants to actually close out this game with a Channel Mount Heroic on the turn, he might have to just absorb everything coming his way. But it is a dangerous game here. It's very difficult to just sort of sit here and witness your life total dwindle, knowing that Peter at any moment on Hayden's turn can just go off and finish the job here. So Hayden's understanding that this isn't just Peter's turn right now. It's Peter potentially being able to just go back to back to close this out. So Hayden has to, evaluate what this 5 damage represents. And I think at this juncture, you're not giving your Shock Charmers to stop this, because frankly, an Opt 3 or an Opt 5 are pretty much the same in terms of what it's going to mean to Peter.
Absolutely.
So if it was a matter of maybe stopping all of it, there's a consideration there, but 3 or 5, it's all the same.
So Peter has a chance now to really basically look at the top 5 and put any number of them at the bottom of his deck, either saving the really nice pieces, for that next turn draw up. And Hayden, yeah, again, I mean, he can't. Briar does not operate effectively on small hands. She really needs to keep a lot of her cards. So that is an Arsenal card here from Peter on this turn. And he set up his entire draw. So he knows basically, essentially, entirely what he's drawing into. Hayden's got to go now. I think if he doesn't really put pressure on Peter, he may die on the next turn with that tunic counter going to 3 for Peter.
Oh, yeah. The tunic counter going to 3 is there. Basically, it's like watching the ball drop in Times Square on New Year's Eve. Like it hits 3, and then it just basically blows up the Storm Striders. It's there to fuel the Storm Strider turn. We're starting with a Bramble Spark Fuse. That's a very good start. That's +3 on the next attack, plus Arcane 1. So essentially 7 free damage coming in here. We're going to go with the Sonata Arcanix. This is a dangerous play, Uber. I have seen Feast or Famine with this move as well. It has been everybody's best friend or everybody's worst enemy, but it does create an embodiment of lightning. He is pitching to it as well. He doesn't want to get stuffed here. There's a CMH. Oh, that's a big pick right there.
Needs an on-attack here. Okay, just the one hit. It's not bad. Again, but pitching into Sonata, you're really hoping for 2 attacks, 2 non-attacks. You can put 2 attacks in your hand here. Seeing a Swarming Gloomveil is really nice. Hayden has to decide here. There's already a Bramble Spark. He can go and Lightning Strike for 10, 13 and have go again as a result of the embodiment of lightning here. And then there's a follow-up. So he likely will be able to present lethal damage to Peter this turn. We'll force some blocks from the Kano. Hayden wants an overwhelming turn. He wants like a force of nature, draw a bunch of cards and do damage and make the turn go on and on and on. That's not an option here.
Well, that was a tough decision to make here. There was always the opportunity here perhaps to go E-Strike, draw a card with the go again already and perhaps extend your turn to a degree. You do have one floating. You do have your Tunic up as well. I may have been enticed to take that E-Strike as well, just to go over the top. And like you mentioned, to take the buff and then use that floating resource to finish the job potentially with Rosetta Thorn. And right now, Peter's just kind of thinking, okay, do I respond to the resolution of the Sonata Arcanix? Is there anything I can do here? Do I turtle up here? Do I just withstand this massive attack here? Because the first thing that comes through is going to be +6 plus an arcane. And keep in mind that the Swarming Gloomveil is looking for auras to be developed, and there has already been one with that embodiment of lightning.
So remember, Sonata Arcanix also, with Hayden getting 1 hit off of it, will do 1 arcane damage. Peter's pitching to that here, throwing this Tome of Findle in the pitch zone. The next attack from Hayden is going to be absolutely gargantuan. An extra 7 damage, 6 of it physical, 1 arcane, like you sort of mentioned. But he has to think about this very carefully. This is the kind of life total that if you're playing Indicator, you know they're looking to try and kill you on a turn like this. It's a little awkward for Peter because he has a yellow in hand and he does not have a Tunic counter yet, and he doesn't have an energy potion. So his resource base is a little bit low, but Hayden has been chipped down enough that for Peter, he might be able to do this without going for a very fancy, elaborate combo. That is the perfect card for this situation. You attack the Arsenal. If that's an Aether Wildfire in there, Peter has to do his turn now.
Well, it's not only just the Arsenal that's being attacked here. It's the fact that you've got 12 damage that's being busted through, knowing that there is a card left in hand. That is the Swarming Gloomveil. Let's keep in mind, I believe it's still the Swarming Gloomveil. There he is. Thank you, Hayden. That's awesome. So we know that Swarming Gloomveil it's not getting pitched to Rosetta Thorn. It's getting thrown directly at Peter Buddensiek's face because it's going to be coming in for, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, assuming that this Command and Conquer connects, it's going to create an embodiment of Earth as well. That's the second aura that's going to be on the board created. So that Swarming Gloomveil is coming in for 7 go again.
This is big, though. I mean, if Peter has, like we expect Kano players to do, put an Aether Wildfire in Arsenal, he risks losing it here. Obviously, Command and Conquer says, this hits you, destroy all cards in that player's arsenal. It is the perfect card to show some disruption here to your opponent. Bri has a lot of damage, a lot of draw effects here. That was a Tome of Aetherwind in Arsenal. So Peter is in, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, he's in deep trouble. Now, having lost that Arsenal card, 3 cards left in hand, Hayden's in a position where he can sort of throw this Swarming now, 7 damage, asks for at least 2 cards from Peter here. This Wizard Armor does not block effectively. I guess Tunic can be used if he wants to. But yeah, 2 cards. Peter goes to 2. We'll still have a chance to try and take Hayden down. But this is very, very good for the Briar player. A lot of pressure on the Kano. But Hayden's definitely within kill range to a properly executed combo from Peter.
Well, that's it. And Hayden's done the work that he needed to do. He capitalized on the fact that the Channel Mat Heroic came early, and now he's got to hope that, it might not that it's coming often, but it's bringing friends. It's got to get those free attacks, those free 4 go-agains, that if he can find those, he's going to be in a good spot. He put Peter into a position where, Rosetta Thorn, even if you're just pitching one to go throw a Rosetta Thorn, that's lethal. That needs to have a little bit of respect on it. The problem is that Hayden Dale has very minimal arcane barrier, and we know that Kano, when he sees an opponent at 19, that's right there. That is ripe for the taking. And Hayden is very well aware that he is in the danger zone, but the turn is gonna be passed back. It's gonna open with a double nimbleism.
Well, that's your embodiment. I mean, Hayden has to feel good because he can shut down 3 damage from beneath the wildfire here. So Peter doesn't have a great way to start off his combo. The fact that he has arcane barrier available plus shock charmers, and also he's threatening lethal here. This asks for 3 cards from Peter, blocking. Cards Peter would sooner use to try and throw lightning bolts in Hayden's direction.
But keep in mind,
obviously has go again on this.
I mean, if you're blocking and going down to 1, the Rosetta Thorn is going to come in for 2 and 2. You're going to have to pitch to block the Arcane with the Storm Striders, and you're still going to need to throw a card in front of Rosetta Thorn. So this is a 2-card block, potentially a 3-card block even, but it's getting all the equipment on the tail end of this. So this is it. This is the time that Peter has to go ahead and actually seal the deal. He's got to cross the finish line. He sees it, but he's also just staring down 10 attack with a go again. Hayden Dale has done everything he can to put this game in reach. It looks so lopsided, Uber, but we're going to find out how this one ends right now.
Aether Dart, not the big card Peter's looking for off the top. This just comes in for 1 arcane. Peter can pitch the Kano multiple times, hope to find something. Very, very dangerous here situation for him. Hayden also has to ask himself, okay, look, what's the cost basis of a Kano kill turn? He knows this. I think Hayden probably knows exactly how much Peter can do in an idealized scenario with the contents of his hand, just because I've heard him rattle off the math to me in a long form video that felt more like a mathematics 1A lecture than anything else. So
yeah,
Hayden, obviously someone who works in sort of fashion, actually. Still definitely got more than a couple almonds to rub together up there in the brain box. So, Peter with a red in hand here. Having to pitch that away means there's not a whole lot to work with. This is an activation of the Crucible of Aetherweave. And off the top, okay, Ragamuffin's Hat. So this says you basically take a card off the top of your deck. You can swap it with one in your hand. So that means that Peter obviously can, play something that's in his hand at instant speed. But this doesn't feel good. This feels like he's grasping at straws a little bit here.
Sonic Boom is not exactly the greatest thing either. I mean, it's not bad, but at the same time, usually these Kano players have things lined up, but Hayden Dale on Briar has just, I think that could have been a completely different landscape, Uber, if he did not find that CMH with the blue earth pitch on early on in the game. If that was not the case, this would have been potentially, I don't want to say a blowout, but it would have definitely been a completely different game, because just the riding off the back of the CMH +3 on all of your attacks, look what it's accomplished. It's accomplished, the Swarming Gloomveil being over the top, a 10 attack E-Strike, and now everything that's followed suit has been incredible. Hayden Dale has been living and dying by the draws here, and has been really, really rewarded off the fact of the double nimbleism into a lightning surge is really putting Peter into a position where, like a Wolverine, kind of backed into a corner. He's got to claw his way out of this. You never know, but Fur is going to fly here, and someone's going to emerge, but they're going to get scalded on their way out.
Yeah, Peter playing Sonic Boom that says, whatever damage this spell does, you can banish the top card of your deck and play it for X less resources. So the top card of Peter's deck right now will get played for 5 less if Hayden takes all this damage. I think Peter Ragamuffin's had to just look at the top card and almost basically opt it. I don't know if I don't know how much he sort of had going. We had 2 cards in his hand, so he gets to choose either the card he draws or the card that was in his hand to go back to the top here. So what comes after Sonic Boom is a great question, because Peter may not have the resources to play to get another Kano activation. So Sonic Boom basically allows him a Kano activation discounted. So Hayden says, okay, I'm just gonna avoid taking too much damage here. I'm being conservative though. I'm gonna pitch to Arcane Barrier. Off the top, this is a discounted spell. It's an Aether Spindle, which is very nice. It's something that normally costs 2. Comes in for free. So 4 damage with Opt X. But what comes after this is the big question. And Hayden might say here, right, well, okay, this might be the time to go, you know what, I'm gonna eat 2 of that damage plus Arcane Barrier 1. So this Aether Spindle now represents 1 Arcane and an Opt 1 opportunity for Peter. He's having a look.
I think basically at this juncture, it's still, we have to completely, rewind a little bit and say there's still 10 damage on the stack. There's still 10 damage that Hayden's throwing, and the fact that Peter,
Exactly.
Yeah, Peter's been basically pitching his whole hand away to go ahead and try to close this game out, meaning that the card that Hayden was holding on to is basically worthless in the sense of defense. It's just resources. It's not going to close out anything. But here we go.
He went for it. That's it. Sorry, I hate to cut you off, but obviously Blazing Aether says, deal to your opponent the amount of arcane damage you've dealt to them so far this turn. It like doubles up on the damage you've done. But Hayden kind of had a feeling this was coming, so he just eats it up. It's only 6 damage dealt by Peter that turn, so we can only deal 6 more. That Blazing Aether. And you see he extends the hand flake because he actually doesn't have the cards left in his hand to block anymore. And Hayden's such a nerd for Kano that he wants to spend some time chatting about it, which I understand. But Kano fizzles out Flake. He cannot find the damage. We never saw an Aether Wildfire from the guy at all that game. Just the pure speed of Briar wearing him down was far too much to withstand.
Well, let's take a look at what exactly happened there. Again, it might not be as clear on the screen at the end of the game there, but frankly, that game ended 1-0. It was basically you just got a day late, a buck short there for Peter. He got so damn close, and again, a game of inches, and ultimately that 1 life total, that 1 extra damage you may have took here or there or whatnot, didn't quite get you there far enough. But I have to go and rewind this back to the fact that
I think it was 7-0, right? Because I think he actually took the 6 damage from that.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. Again, Kano to me, you know what Kano is? Kano is like, it's like taking a pile of bills and documents to your accountant and saying, look, I'm gonna do this, and when I open my eyes, I want a huge, fat refund. So you do your naughty, weird stuff, and I'm just gonna reap the benefits. That's kind of what it looks like when I go, like when I ask some friends to just help me with my taxes. Like, well, did you know that this is a deduction? Mm-hmm. I didn't even know I have this, but now we're gonna pretend that we have this. Yes, I have.
Peter brought all these like, receipts and stuff, and Hayden's the tax man, and he sat there. It's like everything everywhere all at once, and then Hayden's like, well, actually, you still owe the IRS $20,000.
Yeah,
with these deductions. Sorry, mate. The fist bump gets extended. You know what I mean? So tough stuff for the Kano there.
It was definitely difficult, and again, part of it is the fact that when you're playing Kano, you understand that a lot of the deck involves sort of maybe pitch stacking. But again, depending on your opponent, sometimes you have to roll the dice and hope you get there. And the same goes for the Briar game here. The Briar knows that they need to present lethal on turn 3, perhaps, maybe, hopefully ahead of when the Tunic gets to 3. Like if they could present lethal on that in that short form, that means that the Kano's going to have to take the chance of trying to convert without necessarily knowing that they're on their second cycle. A lot of that hinged on the fact that Hayden found a Channel Mount Heroic with the proper pitch and was able to combine multiple attacks to get to a point where when that lethal was presented, Hayden could then perhaps devote some of that resources that he had in hand to that measly little 1 Arcane Barrier and a very timely Shock Charmers to just sort of survive.
It's like Hayden obviously lost the ability, of course, to pitch to Grasp of the Arknight to create a random Rune Charm. You definitely see why Spell Void in this matchup is so crucial, and not a lot of heroes can afford to bring it into sideboard and stuff like that. So the fact that Shock Charmers is there, that's the main reason why you see it in Briar lists in general, and for no other reason generally as it is. But fantastic stuff from Hayden. I think he demonstrated a really solid understanding of the matchup. And a big shout out, of course, to Peter for joining us here for the Goliath Gauntlet number 2. Hayden Dale will advance now through this round of 16, and he'll take on the winner of Michael Hamilton and Matt Rogers. That matchup in itself is going to be fantastic. Hayden, of course, improving on his last Goliath Gauntlet showing, this time advancing to that next round. So big congrats to him. Flake, we have an incredible matchup coming up. A good friend of yours, obviously going up against a good friend of yours here, of course, in our next round of 16 match.
Well, and I get to cast with a good friend of mine. Oh wait, no, that was Tannen. You're here too. That's great. We love it. But like you mentioned, like it's just great. Like just you're talking about the Michael Hamilton versus Matt Rogers match down the line. That is the former number 1 versus the current number 1. Like how do we get these people to come here? It's incredible. Well, maybe we're just nice people and we could make a good production, but ultimately
offer them some money as well, maybe. But
yeah, well, yeah, whatever. Grease the wheels. Again, we do this and then they show up, right? So like that's how it is. But yeah, DMArmada versus MajiinBae is a rematch of the finals of Goliath Gauntlet 1. All the matches are just definitely noteworthy, but the next matchup is one particularly that I'm very excited to cast.
Yeah, stick around for that one, everybody. It's going to be an absolute banger here. Of course, DMAmada with a chance to get revenge on MajiinBae from that final match in our Goliath Gauntlet number 1. Don't go too far. We'll be back with all the action from that game after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the Goliath Gauntlet Flesh and Blood Invitational 2, presented by FAB Cards. It's great to be back. I'm Mitch Leslie here, joined by the one and only Flake, Matt DeMarco. We just had a pretty exciting matchup to kick us off with Hayden Dale advancing over his Kano opponent, Peter Buddensiek. And this next game, it doesn't just promise to be incredible. It's a guarantee at this point. We have DMAmada going up against MajiinBae. Two people, of course, you know really quite well. I heard you played some games actually very recently with DMAmada. I hear he's in hot form, Flag.
Oh, he is in excellent form, especially with this particular list. He's bringing Dromai to the fold, and when we were in Chicago for the MinMax Games ProQuest, we were there, and we had some time, so we said, screw it, let's play some games. I had my Oldham list that I intend on playing at the PQ, and I've been playing it a lot, and in my mind, I thought this was going to be a breeze. I hadn't lost to Dromai since Easter, so I was like, we're fine. This is going to be great, and he saw the lines, he played it like an absolute boss and got there. And the whole mantra that casters / content creators are not actual, they're not threats. He is
not people.
Oh, they're not people. they're just entities. They're just ghosts. But ultimately, he got there and he showed the world last Goliath Gauntlet why there should be some respect on his name, much like MajiinBae. I think everybody's bracket was completely obliterated purely by those two names alone, and they are getting the rematch in early here at Goliath Gauntlet 2.
Yeah, now last time these guys played, and we discussed this at length, I think, on the broadcast, saying that we felt that generally, like, the Dromai was pretty favored. Here, it's pretty hard for Icelander to sort of deal with her ability to really build up over the course of a game. Dealing with Aether Ashsphinx is prohibitively difficult for Icelander in general. As we know, Icelander now has a lot of these sort of attack action cards that, are 6 or more power, so there's potential to break sort of Phantasm there. Cards like Frosting from Arsenal at instant speed during the attack step to sort of blow up dragons, or even Ice Bolt. End the Dromai's term there, it'll deny them that sort of go against. There's a few strategies that you can use, but in general, a lot of Icelander players feel like they're not favored. Let's have a closer look at this Dromai list from DMAmada, because it includes a very impressive new card from Dynasty in Crown of Dominion. That's right, Royal Dromai apparently is here to stay, and I'm hearing very good things about this deck, Flake. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect from, if we see that Crown of Dominion brought into a matchup like this.
Well, the first thing, like you mentioned, was the fact that it's the Crown of Dominion, is getting a lot of respect against with a lot of different heroes. Even, Briar, the Royal Briar is out there. A lot of these heroes are becoming royal because they want to get the benefit of something called Cash In. And Cash In is a 4-cost draw 2 cards. However, if you can go ahead and just, pay the toll, baby, why don't you just give me one of those gold coins and I'll look the other way? You can draw 2 cards essentially for free. And the issue again with this is that you're playing a 3-pack of them. It's just a matter of refilling the card and maybe extending those turns that are get really nasty. Now, this is more of a red line build. We're going to see the 3 Ravenous Rabbles, Spears of Surreality is in here, as well as cards like Blaze Headlong. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there are, and then the other red go-agains, Billowing Mirage and such. So this is looking not necessarily to just establish a dragon horde. It's meant to sort of peel cards out of your hand with the typical forms of damage, such as the Ravenous Rabbles, the Dunebreaker Centipies, the Spears of Surreality, And then once all those cards are expended, maybe you have some of those nasty dragons appearing that have more detrimental on-hit effects, like Kyloria, for example. So we're going to see these dragons maybe play it a little bit slower, but when it comes down to it, this is a deck that was able to steal a lot of life points from Iyslander, and who already comes in at a 4-point deficit.
Yeah. A big shout out as well to a newer inclusion in this deck, Red Hot, which is actually a Dromaya Fire specialization that says if it's played as Chainlink 4 or higher, so ideally after a pretty wide turn, when you attack with it, you sort of reveal the top X cards of your deck. And then for how many red cards that are amongst those, you deal damage. So it's like you can deal damage equal to the number of chain links you have if they're all red cards, which in Dromai, your odds are pretty good of that. So this is an evolution of that list. Curious to see what kind of game it has into Iyslander.
Yeah.
Let's have a...
Sorry, just before we go on, there's two incredibly important and devastating pieces in this list, and that is Tomultai and that is Themai. These two dragons are going to be front and center, and it's going to be DMArmada desperately hunting for these cards because Tomultai, upon attack, is going to steal the Stormstriders or force a situation where MajiinBae has to use the Stormies. The other side of the build is going to be that Themai is just going to ice out Iyslander altogether. So once those hit the board, it is going to be a completely different game.
Yeah, denying the Iyslander the ability to play cards on DMAmada's turn is definitely something he'd like to bring Themai in for. That will come out of the sideboard. Great point. Two key cards. Blowing up Stormstriders is just so powerful in this matchup. Let's go across and talk about the Iyslander now. I think that MajiinBae's been a huge fan of Wizards in general. Really adept, very talented card game player. Most notably, I think of Legends of Runeterra. But he comes in here with a list that looks very similar to sort of that Michael Hamilton World Champion winning list. A lot of people have said they feel like, for the most part, this sort of Bulllander list is pretty solved, right? Iyslander presenting like a lot of these pretty big physical attacks and then can sort of present mixed damage in the form of Arcane. The true Battle Mage sort of fair to see, I think, in Flesh and Blood. And we've seen just how powerful it can be. Combining Disruption, like Channel, like Frigid, like Hypothermia, with like these huge attacks that make it really hard for your opponent to sort of to match your damage output across the turn cycle. So again, like we talked about, it's a harder matchup in general for the Iyslander, but MajiinBae was able to navigate it expertly last time around, and DMAmada is back for revenge. Let's waste no more time, Flake. Let's jump into it. It's going to be MajiinBae on Iyslander, our previous Goliath Gauntlet champion, going up against last series runner-up DMAmada on Droma.
Well, we see it right out of the gate. Again, there's going to be no royalty this time. It's going to be the crown of reflection, and part of that is going to be a matter of just trying to go ahead and cheat out something like your sorry, I'm just looking for that card. Where is it? Passing Mirage. Yeah, Passing Mirage is going to be key because Bulllander is a deck now that has a significant amount of poppers in terms of triggering the Phantasm here, as MajiinBae wastes no time and goes ahead and starts with a Cold Snap, creating a Frostbite out of Arsenal. The game is underway, and like you mentioned, it is very much a quote-unquote solved style deck, but in terms of little areas of improvement of actually sort of deviating from that Michael Hamilton's original list, I think Scar for a Scar has sort of made its way in a little bit, as well as some players favor maybe one copy of a yellow Aether Ice Vein, perhaps a second. In this case, MajiinBae saying, I don't even need the yellows. We're just going to get there the old-fashioned way.
So what happened here, very quickly, we have a Rake the Embers played, and then from Arsenal, a Cold Snap causing a Frostbite. Armada responds by pitching to his Flamescale Furnace, going up one resource, basically cancelling out the extra cost that Frostbite, sort of the tax that it imposes on you. So his opening with Rake the Embers here is pretty big, because it's those 1/1s, it's those... Love that altar. Beautiful. It's the 1/1s, those Aether Ashwings that are particularly annoying for Iyslander to deal with, unless she has a Frosting in Arsenal, and then she's sort of losing out on damage here. So we have, the Rake the Embers, of course, crucial in terms of sort of getting that Ash generation. You can create an Ash, and then you can transform up to 3 of them into Aether Ashwings. And bearing in mind, DMAmada pitching Reds is creating a lot of Ash here on this turn. Frostbite now being represented here on his side of the table. I love these altars, man.
DMArmada is such a champion of the community, and here's exactly why. Because he's using Frostbites that are basically Frostbites that from the community, because I believe that Frostbite and that Ash, that is from Mr. Chocolate, one of the a community member. There's another Ash token as well from the community. So he's just showing off just how awesome the community is and showing off again. Hey, he's saying I got some cool different Frostbites, some Ash tokens, and again, all capped off with a Marvel cold foil Ashwing.
Yeah, I love the Marvel Aether Ashwing, the alternate art, the darker color is really exciting. And what I love how they produce like a random drop at armories for their playmats also to be in that Marvel coloring. That was so cool. I was in Brisbane randomly in the store and it was like, actually, we got a Marvel Aether Ashwing on deck tonight. That's what you're playing for. And everyone just battened down the hatches and got serious. I love that. It was a ton of fun. So here's Kyloria developed now. So Rake the Embers creating 2 Aether Ashwings, then Kyloria hitting the table, which is of particular annoyance at times to Icelander because it can steal her items or draw cards for DMAmada. Both really frustrating effects.
And there are items to be stolen. There could be potentially energy potions, but as well as those ice amulets are going to be definitely up for grabs. Kyloria with her grubby little fingers is going to want to go ahead and add to the hoard of gold. In this case, the Ashwings, not MajiinBae's concern. He's just going to go ahead and absorb those because if he has something to pop this, perhaps one of the finals fighting spirits, maybe you've got a wounded bull, that Kyloria is prime pickings to just not worry about it anymore. Again, these dragons do have phantasms, so if you block them with a attack action of 6 or greater, it's going to just basically blow it all up, and it's like it never even happened.
And of course, MajiinBae has a few of those, but he'd much rather use them to pressure DMAmada's life total down because those Aether Ashwings all have Arcane Barrier 1. So the more of those Armada can develop, the much easier it is for him to cancel out any arcane damage from MajiinBae and any on-hit effects associated with them, like Aether Ice Vein, for example. So very frustrating. If this has got to feel so good, just following up with a Blaze Headlong here at the end of a pretty hefty 6 damage worth chain. Love to see that.
And he's, again, Armada showing off that he's got all the bling. He's showing the extended art Blaze Headlong.
Man, this guy. He's
and I love it.
Out.
Well, and what's fascinating here is that MajiinBae gave the green light to the Kyloria to connect and draw a card. Armada just said, okay, if you're going to take the 4, we're going to make it 8, and that's basically what happened here. MajiinBae looks like he's smiling in his portrait. That's his campaign poster, frankly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he just that 4 became an 8 real quick, and MajiinBae down to 26 now. But we're going to see this change in a heartbeat because when Icelander has that ice card in Arsenal, it can be dangerous. But Dromai is probably the worst matchup for Icelander at this point. So he's going to just go ahead and throw a 7, bottoming a card and holding on to one that you could probably guess is going to be a blue ice card.
I mean, Kyloria is so frustrating for MajiinBae to block. It's going to cost him 2 cards or Brothers in Arms and a pitch, right? So doesn't feel great for him. He can get rid of it with a Scar for a Scar, which is super efficient, given that MajiinBae's at lower life. It's a 0 for 4 with Go again. And then, he follows up with a big, tall, physical attack. And Armada has to go, well, right, how well do I function on small hands? Dromai definitely needs to keep some cards. Again, when your deck's mostly reds, it can be hard to pay for some things. So seeing 7 damage here, though, is not insignificant. DMAmada understands. The lower life he gets, the more realistic the odds of MajiinBae going for a kill combo on him involving sort of Storm Striders like Adamerida Scalding or some other sort of damaging spell. You can get up to like 12 damage in one go. I will say, MajiinBae definitely wants to make sure he gets to use a Storm Striders at his own volition and not have it forced by like a Tonal Tie. So stripping cards from DMAmada's hand makes it harder for him to develop a Tonal Tie, something that would target equipment and blow it up here. So here it is, block 3, says Armada, keeping 3.
Good start here. Also worth noting, DMArmada is using those phantasmal footsteps. And when I played against him this past weekend, sometimes you just think, okay, Mage Master Boots, you can go ahead and cheat out a passing Mirage, play a Mirror Guy, and then your dragons are pretty well protected. But the reason he's playing those are precisely for things like this. This is a draconic attack. It's coming in for 5 go again. If you bust this up, you do have the opportunity to recover the action point with the Phantasmal Footsteps. So DMArmada knows that pressuring life total is key. And if you can recover these action points based off of the Phantasm effect that MajiinBae might commit to blow this up, that is definitely a good thing for DMArmada. DMArmada wants to push the tempo, wants to shave that life total down, where eventually it's going to come to a head where MajiinBae is going to start committing cards purely to blocking. And once DMArmada sees an opening where MajiinBae doesn't have any cards to commit to Arsenal, that's when the entire landscape changes here. Icelander without an arsenal is basically like having one hand tied behind your back.
Absolutely. MajiinBae, that's where all the action comes from. That Arsenal card could be like it could be a defense reaction. It could also be like a red attack that he's hoping to hold on to. As for Lie hits the board here, so when it attacks, it can deal 1 arcane damage to up to sort of any 2 targets. Only 1 here, it's MajiinBae, so 3 in total. Not insignificant amounts of damage coming in here. And MajiinBae, you're not developing his arsenal here, not playing that arsenal card, makes you wonder what is it. I think Armada moves to his end step, draws up. It's now MajiinBae's turn. So now we know that was an Enlightened Strike in Margin's arsenal. It's great. 5 by the looks of things go again here, which means that like you can put down like an Amulet of Ice, another attack to follow it up if you want to just keep pressuring and trying to race this Dromai down, which is something MajiinBae definitely needs to think about, because there's like Arcane Barrier 4 on Armada's side of the map here. That sort of arcane damage from MajiinBae is much less reliable source of pressuring his opponent.
I think if you're looking to race, I mean, the difference here is this is why this matchup is so much different than, let's say, the Guardian matchup. In the Guardian matchup, your objective is to clean out all the dragons and go the long game. In this matchup, it's the complete opposite. If you start addressing dragons, you do not have enough resources in your deck to kill all the dragons that DMArmada is going to start developing. Your Waning Moon cannot target allies. It can only target the opposing hero. It's not like a Winter's Wail or a Kadachi or something that can go ahead and just cut through the dragon horde. This is a different story. MajiinBae's only line to victory here is just to potentially ignore the dragons to a degree and try to get DMArmada to a position where he can do some fun theatrics and maybe shut it down. What MajiinBae desperately needs right now is he needs a channel Lake Frigid, and he needs a way to sort of curtail DMArmada's constant pressure here, and this is a great way to start this off.
This is to strip cards. MajiinBae says, okay, you can block out most of this damage, but not all of it here. So how much are you willing to pitch to sort of shut down this 5 damage? Most decks cannot stop Aether Icebane from hitting in some way or another here. So this is disruptive. And very quickly, I like that Armada blocks with armor there. He's not low on life at all, but none of MajiinBae's physical attacks have on-hit effects. So just throw your equipment at them as soon as they come out. Like turn 1, it's fine, because you want to try and keep yourself high on life so you don't fall into the kill zone. I see a lot of people trying to preserve their armor against a Bulllander. Literally just throw it out. If you got it, just eat up the damage, preserve some of the life here. So Armada takes a bunch of damage here. There was a discard unless you paid 2. Looks like he paid 2 there. He just ate up 1 of the arcane damage. Very normal, right? You normally just pitch a blue and take 4. So good damage from MajiinBae on that turn, able to present 9, but Armada has a pretty hefty grip of cards, and it's a sweeping blow deployed first.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like a great point there again with no on-hit effects. Committing the equipment early is just at the first opportunity. Just why waste it, or why not? Why waste an opportunity to actually save some life? It could be, frankly, high on life. I mean, it's not just for after school specials. You got to get in there and just maintain that life total, because it's gonna eventually come to a point where Armada's gonna understand that he's going to be in that kill zone, in that dangerous wizard red zone. And right now, 3 attack for sweeping blow is a good start. MajiinBae's sort of dwindling down to 14. We're going to follow this up with another Asvalai. MajiinBae is just, this is a nightmare matchup for him. It's difficult. He got there in the past, but it's always a slog. And DMArmada is only improving as a player with Dromai. It's a very new hero. DMArmada doesn't always, MajiinBae and Icelander, it's like, that's a main, right? That's his main, that's his Bae, that's who he plays. DMArmada plays all kinds of different heroes. And here he is just making it happen. And the first popper has finally emerged.
Yeah, so obviously Phantasm activated there. Aether Ashwing will die instantly to a 6 or more power attack used to block, and will end the turn essentially for DMArmada. You cannot use your Phantasmal Footsteps to recover the action points used with attacking with dragons. It's just attack actions, so it's only relevant for the Centipede that Armada has in the deck, like we saw the previous turn. It's a pretty efficient way for MajiinBae to stop this damage coming in, but still opening with a sweeping blow means Armada got 3 damage plus an Ash on that turn. Doesn't suck at all when we're racing. Scar for a Scar comes out here for MajiinBae. It has Go again, followed up by an Enlightened Strike. This guy is playing generics, bro. It's just generics. And again, presenting big damage. It should be 11 on the turn cycle for him.
It's so nasty because you're basically playing an Uprising hero with Welcome to Wraith generic cards. It's like
And it's good. It's so good.
that's the problem. I had this discussion yesterday. I was practicing late last night with MajiinBae and Brian Basoko, and Brian was like, "I need to sort of figure out if Guardian has any chance against Icelander." And at the end of the day, we played 3 or 4 matches of MajiinBae on Icelander versus Brian Basoko on Oldham, and what we surmised, what the conclusion that we came to was legitimately Brian Basoko saying, "I'm just going to email Michael Hamilton and saying thank you for ruining this whole this whole experience for me," because you're right, and sometimes it takes somebody to turn something completely upside down and find value in otherwise bulk. Because Wounded Bull and Fyendel's Fighting Spirit were kind of do nothing cards for quite a while, or rather Wounded Bull was, at least. Here is Michael Hamilton saying, "Hey, I know you're expecting ice and fire, but here is some physical old-fashioned punch you in the teeth."
Yeah, it's a battle mage deck. I love it. This idea of like a physical attacking plus like arcane magic wielding hero. It's fun. That was really the initial vision from Legend Story for Icelander, but it is what it is. I think that now as we head back to Armada's turn here, MajiinBae needs to find a way to be disruptive on DMAmada's turn, because Stephen he kept a full hand, so full hand plus Arsenal, very scary. Again, you have like your Flamescale Furnace to sort of protect you against Frostbite. Such a good card in this matchup. And we open with an Enlightened Strike here, presumably with Go again. So DMAmada giving MajiinBae a taste of his own medicine here at 15 life each. 5 Go again is the call.
It's definitely a good call. You got to be aggressive against this Icelander player. I think both players have frankly dodged very significant bullets on the other side. MajiinBae not finding those CLFs, which would be very, very detrimental to Armada's go wide strategy. But on the other side, DMArmada has not found Tumultai or Themai. So MajiinBae is kind of getting a free pass of being able to still bend the rules a little bit and play on the opponent's side. And is that a Blizzard?
Yeah. And it's a Blizzard. So what's so important about this is that this doesn't have to come from MajiinBae's arsenal. It's an instant. So it comes out of your hand whenever you like it. Don't need Stormstrider, don't need nothing. It will actually inflict a Frostbite as well. So Armada now has to decide, do I pay 2 resources in order to keep this Go again, which is what Blizzard is asking of him? And can I afford to pay through the Frostbite that is going to be put down? Now, if Armada already had a red card in pitch, the Frostbite wouldn't be a problem. You just pitch to Flamescale Furnace, go to 2 resources, and then, you get taxed by 1, but, there's no net loss of pitch. Here, it's actually much more frustrating for DMAmada. If those are 2 red cards in his hand, he's spending the rest of his hand to get Go again here. And if he doesn't do that, Flake, he ends his turn with 2 cards in his hand plus Arsenal, which feels awful.
Now,
Armada really needs to make use of the full grip here if he wants to put pressure on MajiinBae.
I honestly believe that if it is 2 red cards, and even if this does stuff it, you're still paying the 2 because you're at least generating ash. If your turn is completely garbage anyways, you might as well, you can kind of grow a flower out of this pile of crap that's been sent to him to a degree.
Good fertilizer.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, those could be, if that's like a Blaze Headlong and something else that's pretty decent, maybe you hold on to it because you want to pressure it next time. It's just a very difficult scenario here for DMArmada because, like you said, it's not just about the paying 2 to maintain the Go again and protect it. It's also the Frostbite that Icelander is going to present.
Yeah.
So what do you do in this case? Because DMArmada has to have a blue card in hand to do anything beyond this.
If he had a blue, he would have snapped that off. The problem is here, like you pay 2, like you said, you get the ash, which is great. Pitching, obviously, having good ash generation is really important here, especially if you find like a nice little Rake the Embers or anything like that down the line. But even if there's pitching, Armada would have to pay 1 to attack with any of his dragons after this. So I think you're in a position where you're damned if you do and also damned if you don't here.
I think that potentially he might have a blue, but maybe he's considered like, okay, I can give up the blue, but maybe after this I'm followed up with a Waning Moon, or no, he can't play the Waning because there hasn't been an action played yet. So, okay, so that might not be this area. I think what he's thinking here is that there's still a card in Arsenal. This could be worse, could absolutely be worse. So he might be valuing this resources purely as an arcane barrier sink to use these resources to protect his life total. And I think that's what the thought is in his mind, is that he's wrestling with is, I could maybe pay through this and the Frostbite. I may have a blue, but what happens if the next card that comes out of Arsenal creates more havoc for me, and then a Waning Moon comes in and suddenly I'm at like 9 or 8, and then I'm in a really big pickle. Okay, so it is 2 reds.
So we get Go again. Enlightened Strike now can be followed up with, but well, there's no cards left in Steven's hand here at all. So no way to sort of keep going with that Frostbite in play. And MajiinBae gets to keep a large number of cards here. This might also offer him the potential of like fusing something or deploying another large attack on his turn. But he has to decide first how much of this 5 damage does he want to block. Icelander, really quite happy to block with 2 cards every turn cycle, right? That allows you to, deploy something on your turn and have an arsenal card. There's no Coronet Peak here, interestingly, because that doesn't do well against Dromai, as when Dromai says, oh, I have to pay 1.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just get a free Ash. So Crown of Providence here is the play for MajiinBae, which I think is pretty good.
Well, there's a consideration here. I think that MajiinBae, I mean, the 2 cards pitched here may have been it may have been a scenario where perhaps MajiinBae could have just waited. If he's anticipating no go again, he could still have an opportunity to pitch those 2 cards anyways to the damage that might be coming from Waning Moon or for an Arsenal card. But pitching them anyways over here does generate Ash, so it does give you a little bit more leeway. Perhaps you do play another Rake the Embers. Maybe you have some more dragons that you want to deploy. DMArmada probably just really hustling through that deck, looking for one of those Themis. A Themi really changes the landscape of what this game looks like, how it's played. MajiinBae would have to change everything. And not only from the perspective of he can't play on his own turns, but his attack will only be played on his turn, and they will probably be directed at one of those Themis just to reopen his options.
MajiinBae might have had a dud in his arsenal there because he actually opts to use the ability of Crown of Providence to put his arsenal at the bottom of his deck and draw a card when he blocks.
I think it was it may have been the Insidious Chill that he used to fuse a turn or 2 before.
That would make sense. Yeah.
And in which case, again, Insidious Chill at this juncture in the game, I think you're a little too far gone.
Way beyond that. That's why I like that he blocked with the Frostex as well, Flake, because it's not really a Frostex game. You really want Frostex in a game that you expect to go a little bit longer. So getting to block with that for MajiinBae, as it's a 3 block that sort of covers up that Enlightened Strike is great. MajiinBae, again, wants to pressure. Can he pressure Armada's hand with a physical attack and then disrupt him on Armada's turn? That's like the best case scenario. That's why I think that this Icelander deck is so scary, because on both sides of the turn cycle, you're actually asking your opponent for cards quite often, or just making it harder for them to execute their strategy. But it's a pretty nice grip of cards here for MajiinBae. I think he's up to 3, so it's a really question of how he wants to make use of his turn now.
Yeah, just double checking here the life totals. It's 15 apiece on the board. I'm not sure if DMArmada played a Sigil of Solace to sort of bring himself back up to 15. We'll get some clarity on that as we move forward. But ultimately here, as we see it on the board, I think is what's accurate. It might be 15 apiece.
Yeah, I think it is.
Ultimately, MajiinBae here, no arsenal, and that is a very coveted thing that he needs to have filled with an ice card in order just to throw disruption, throw effects here, or just a standard ice bolt in this case, pitching the Emeritus Scolding. That's going to be 3 arcane damage. Plenty of ways to sort of absorb this. You've got arcane, you have the Null Rune Gloves, the Crown of Reflection offers some arcane barrier, plus the Aether Ashwing is going to help out over here. So if our DMArmada did find a blue card that he wants to commit here, he could just sort of soak it all. And I think protecting your life total to a degree is definitely a perfectly fine thing to do here, because at this juncture, with just an Asvalai on the board, you can commit your whole hand and just attack with the Asvalai, and that will eventually whittle it down. So DMArmada can kind of turtle up to a degree as long as he has a board developed of permanents on the board like those dragons.
And with MajiinBae having 1 floating and a tunic counter up, he can follow this up with a Waning Moon on his turn. And still sort of pressure some extra arcane damage if that's his goal. With only 1 card left in hand after this, obviously he wants to put that in the pocket if he can. It's interesting because obviously if DMArmada has a blue in hand and opts to commit that to preserving his life total right now, he might struggle to sort of stop the disruption coming his way on his turn. Looks like he just takes it. So now he goes to 12. MajiinBae getting value through all that arcane barrier. Armada is just adamant on keeping his hand.
That's the danger of bringing a very red line deck against something that is going to create disruption, create taxation effects like the Frostbites as well. Paying is not going to be efficient. It's, the cards may block for 3 on paper, but if it's all this magical mysticism that's being pressed through your ears, you got to find other ways to block it, and that is Null Rune. And unfortunately, you don't want to commit 3 cards to prevent 3 damage, even though it's a fairly smart thing to do at a certain juncture in the game, but that's not now. And here's Chromai coming out for free. It's going to transform an Ash. Now, Chromai is a nasty one because it's basically insurance against poppers. You send it out, front and center, and it does generate you extra action points. So it's not a go again effect. It's an extra action point, which circumvents things like Blizzard.
And hypothermia as well, if that was going to be an issue. So yeah, it's lovely. Chromai attacking will generate an action point. Channel Lake Frigid, though, that's a nice one. We're not dealing with anything that interrupts go again. We're just making everything that much more expensive for DMAmada. To attack with a dragon, you better pay. You want to deploy a dragon, you better pay more.
It's nasty. It's like rent in Toronto. Oh, you want to throw your garbage out? That's going to cost you.
I mean, as a
you want to live
California
indoors?
resident, I can attest to that. It is pricey, my guy.
It's like, yeah, well, we painted the banister. Your rent's going up 65%. It's like, oh, thank you for that. Amazing. I didn't even get to choose the color.
It's in line with market rate. Yeah, well, I believe that somehow.
Yeah, and then they have the gall to call it newly renovated. So,
my goodness.
Liars. All right. Well, at the first order of business here is the fact that this is probably going to resolve. It's going to create a frostbite here. Chromai's attack still on the stack there, as you see DMArmada saying, "Hey, don't forget I'm my boy here."
Yeah,
so that's
Chromai resolves. It just resolves now.
It's on the stack just to show up onto the battlefield as well. But the first order of business here is that the Channel Lake Frigid is going to tax every move, but it's going to create this initial double down of the frostbite as well, which is going to be difficult to pay through. And especially if DMArmada is holding on to a lot of red cards, you do not want to give up 2 cards to just swing for 3. So DMArmada is going to have to make some decisions here. He's really, really needing a blue card in hand to just open up the turn a little bit more. But as it stands right now, a Chromai and an Asvalai on the board is pretty dangerous against MajiinBae, who is life total is at 15 here. So DMArmada is getting the work done, but a good start here is that CLF, like we mentioned, those really disruptive cards that are going to sort of really pump the brakes and shift the aggression level that DMArmada is looking to present.
So DMArmada wants to attack with the Chromai here. It's going to cost him 2. Oh. So there's 1 pitch, Tumultai into the pitch zone.
That's a huge pitch, though.
And a Spears of Seriality.
I mean, Tumultai, I think at this juncture, throwing the Tumultai out there, first of all, it's expensive. So you might not see the resources necessary to put it out there. You need to pair it up with a blue, which DMArmada clearly does not have. But at the same time, maybe your life total is so low that if you do attack the Stormstriders, MajiinBae will say, all right, you're so low to the ground right now, I'm just going to pop them, and whatever I get out of it is fine. So DMArmada didn't find the resources for Tumultai, and maybe it's a little bit too late in the game, but Themai is still something that he's probably desperately hunting for.
Yeah, again, it's a pricey dragon to develop, costing 2. In this economy, it's costing 3. So there's a lot being committed to that. But again, it's something that Armada doesn't even need to attack with necessarily. Just have it there for that persistent effect. MajiinBae is obviously if he saw it come down, he'd have to do all the things he wanted to do that turn then and there, like playing from his arsenal, for example. So this Channel Lake Frigid, this is really big, I think, and not to be understated. MajiinBae sees 3 damage on the stack and opts just to not block it. So whenever I see an Icelander keep 3 cards, it says to me they're trying to deploy a large attack and arsenal, or they're trying to potentially fuse one of their spells. So I see 2 cards, not so bad. 3, different story here. So Armada wants to keep this party going, and that's another red pitch here. So every dragon he attacks with, he has to pay for, but again, he kept a full grip to do this. So MajiinBae says, well, okay, well, let's poke first. I'm going to hit you for 3. DMAmada says, okay, I'll take it. Now what about this 2? MajiinBae says, okay, yeah, 2 and 1, I'll take that.
Well, there's one thing that's pretty recession-proof. It's the waning moon. I mean, that's a pretty nasty effect over there on MajiinBae's side. CLF does survive the turn because it doesn't have to check, because it was done on DMArmada's turn. That's the beauty of sneaking out that CLF on your opponent's turn, is it doesn't do the channel check to look for a ice card and pitch until the end of your turn. MajiinBae playing on both people's turn, that selfish bastard, but he's still getting it done here. It's on the board, and the 3 dragons that Armada's leaning on, it's not a bad 3-pack there. You got one with Arcane Barrier, you got one that generates action points, and another one that attacks you in 2 ways. DMArmada has the tools to get it done, but now he's got to look at a Aether Ice Mane that is not fused, apparently. Okay, so it's not fused, just 3 damage, and if it hits, you're not peeling any cards away. DMArmada's got to like the fact that is not getting fused.
There's a lot to be frightened of, though, as the Dromai player. 3 damage here. Remember, like you know, pitching to Arcane Barrier here feels awful, like we covered in a red line deck. Yeah, you have AB3 on board, which is fine. Because everything's so much more expensive when it comes back to your turn. You need to give up a card minimum to attack with a dragon. And the fact that you've fallen into what could be kill combo range is extremely scary. So yes, Armada says, I'm going to preserve my life total here. I'm pitching this blue to AB3. But MajiinBae really just wanted to get an ice card in pitch to keep Channel Lake Frigid around for another turn cycle. DMAmada has 3 cards in hand now. MajiinBae will be poised to try and blow him to smithereens now on this turn cycle.
Smithereens is a term I have not heard in ages, and
Smithereens!
I love it. I love it. If I had a band, I would call my band the Smithereens, and I think that would. Yeah. Would you be in my band, Uber?
Yeah, I'd be in the Smithereens. That sounds incredible.
All right, well, we'll have to audition you. I'm not just going to bring anyone on the band.
That's awkward. I mean, I thought it was good enough. All right, I play a mean bass. I slap at a bass.
Rake the Embers is one of those ace cards that DMArmada is going to have to lean on to make this to cross the finish line here. It's not just a matter of 3 extra threats that you can send. It's 3 extra Arcane Barrier, which can really help kind of close the gap between the 3 Arcane Barrier that you're basic, or the 2 Arcane Barrier they're packing already with the Nullrune Gloves and the Crown of Reflection. But when you're facing down something like a red Aether Ice Vein, you need more of these little bastards on the board to sort of
He might just be dead. I hate to say this, I really do, but DMAmada has to pitch 2 cards to play the Rake the Embers, and then obviously that card itself is deployed. So 1 card left in hand. Each dragon costs 1 to attack with, so I'm enjoying the fact that we're developing threats here. But everything is so expensive for Dromai. This Chromai attacking says you best be paying 1. Well, the action point is great, but if you don't have the resources to do anything with them, it's very dangerous. And again, Icelander, there's like any combination of things that can kill DMAmada here. Stormstrider's into like a 3 damage plus like a damaging spell from Arsenal. Waning Moon could do it. Even just like Stormstridering something out of Arsenal here and Waning Moon is like at least 6 damage, maybe more. And DMAmada doesn't have the card density to necessarily pay for Arcane Barrier. As far as we know, if he's kept a blue here, then that's the correct move. We see, yeah, so this is it. Emeritus Golden comes out of Arsenal. This says 4 arcane damage now on the stack. This is not Stormstriders, but this is a huge amount of damage. And Armada has to say, okay, if I take this, then Waning Moon, I'm going to 2. That is very frightening.
DMArmada himself, a very adept Wizard player, somebody who really loves Wizard himself, so he knows precisely what the reach is on some of these cards and what could potentially happen. I think that there was a situation perhaps where he saw that there was an Aether Ice Vein not fused, so perhaps he thought MajiinBae was holding on to an attack action, and that was in the arsenal. Perhaps he was thinking that he could get a little stretchy here and roll the dice and say that if you can't play out of your arsenal, I don't have to worry about Waning Moon or any of those other things. You'll have to bust your Stormstriders, and I have enough, Arcane Barrier on the board to perhaps deal with it. But it is a blue, so that is a huge help to DMArmada. That gives him so much extra berth here.
All right, so here it is, the Waning Moon now coming in for 3. Yeah, huge to have a 2 blue hand there. MajiinBae now is, looking at that Chromai, thinking to himself, okay, well, I don't know if I can keep Channel Lake Frigid around for another turn here. So he has to decide whether he's blocking this 3 damage that's coming his way. DMAmada, of course, not able to do anything after that, so it looks like he's going to draw up, and this is MajiinBae's turn. So Majin takes the damage, drops down, and here comes Brain Freeze Fuse. Let's have a look at that hand.
Okay, but we need to really address the fact that Channel Lake Frigid just saved MajiinBae's life. If that Channel Lake Frigid was not on the board, it would have been Chromai into Asvalai into 4 more dragons, and MajiinBae would have been basically iced out. He would have had to commit something like his Tunic to block all the cards in the hand as well. It wouldn't have went well. In this case, MajiinBae is going to go ahead and just thank his lucky stars that CLF came when it did and saved the day, because he might be able to sort of turn this around and ice it out. Look at those dragons in hand. He's getting rid of the Chromai, but he sees all reds here, and that is going to light him up. Red means go in this case for MajiinBae.
So much information, Flake. He knows he can really start to put pressure down. I'm surprised he didn't put the E-Strike back at the top, but I guess E-Strike sinking a card for DMAmada means that he has even less resources to pay for incoming damage via Arcane Barrier. So MajiinBae says, I'd prefer you not to have like a free dragon to get to throw down. That I don't want to sort of deal with. But we are living in a world now where there's no Channel Lake Frigid on board, so DMAmada no longer has to pay to attack with each of these dragons. At 5 life, though, is And with Storm Striders up on the other side, MajiinBae just needs a damaging spell in arsenal or in hand to threaten lethal.
MajiinBae still at 9. Still a lot of work to be done here.
DMArmada did he block the Chromite attack on the previous cycle?
Was there even an option to? Did he pitch to even attack?
Maybe maybe he couldn't attack. Maybe it was
the CLF, like we mentioned, has done so much work because I think that turn opened up with the Rake the Embers. Yeah,
he could attack. Yeah,
it opened with the Rake the Embers, which provided DMArmada a little bit more cushion against Arcane Barrier. I think that was a smart play here. MajiinBae now facing down a sweeping blow. It's going to just be looked at and waved aside, as right now it's going to be MajiinBae activating the Icelander ability to play the ice card out of Arsenal. I believe it's a Polar Blast. It doesn't matter what the effect of the Polar Blast is, saying, hey, do you want to pay 1 to give my, to avoid getting dominated on my next attack? And DMArmada just would probably scoff at that because Polar Blast from Arsenal draws you a card, creates a Frostbite, and gives DMArmada the biggest headache ever because this all goes back to that brain freeze last turn, Uber, where MajiinBae says, I know you got 3 red cards. We're going to make it hurt.
Yeah, it's big. Obviously, Armada's, he's not paying. Polar Blast is replacement level in the Icelander list here. It's just designed to cycle itself and get you a Frostbite and also turn on Waning Moon. That obviously is the purpose. I have seen some situations where there's been like dominated, wounded balls being used, but it's such a niche case in many situations. So Frostbite's there. There's still 3 damage on the stack, right? The sweeping blow was what allows DMAmada to get go again on all of his dragons because he's now played a red card this turn. The first attacking dragon will cost though because of that Frostbite, and once DMAmada parts with that extra card, then he's in danger. Yep, Storm Striders here. This could be it. 3 damage from Waning Moon, cut down to 2 Storm Striders with an Aether Ice Vein coming in on top, and there are no cards left for DMAmada to stave off that arcane damage. MajiinBae whittles the Dromite down to 5 and has the kill combo pretty comfortably in hand.
Devastating blow ultimately to DMArmada there, who was missing some key pieces early on. I think when you're going on this red line build, what you're looking to do, frankly, is to give your opponent it's kind of like the same thing that Icelander's doing. We're sending some of that arcane your way that you're going to, and the Frostbite and Detriment and Disruption that way, but you're also going to have to worry about things like the big attacks that I'm sending your way as well. In terms of DMArmada, I want red cards because I want to generate Ash, and all of my dragons want to see red cards in the pitch zone and on the play zone, or the combat chain. Ultimately, however, when you're really heavy on reds, you cannot efficiently block out all the arcane. You can have Arcane Barrier 1 billion, but if you're paying 1 card per point, that is such a poor trade-off. You need to be blocking 3 off of each card that you're pitching or donating to the opponent. And MajiinBae noted that, hey, I haven't seen a Themi. Your Tomotai has been pitched already. We got to get this going. I don't care about the physical damage you're dealing to me because I know that eventually I'm going to get you because you do not have... It's not that you don't have the cards to give up. It's that they're not the right color, and you are probably coveting just blasting me to smithereens, as you put it, with the physical damage and eventually the dragons. The dragons did not have any runway to go ahead and land there because the Channel Lake Frigid just iced it out completely. It was such a timely Channel Lake Frigid for MajiinBae.
Yeah, I mean, you're dead right. When he started to get low enough on life where Dromite can threaten these really wide, dangerous turns, Channel Lake Frigid completely shuts that down, not to mention the extra Frostbite that's created as a result of that, which you saw really hurt DMAmada on a couple of occasions. But being able to use Brain Freeze sort of around the range where you want to try and blow your opponent up, you get the information that it's just red cards in their hand. You're also stripping one out of their hand. You know exactly what they're doing, and once they deploy a sweeping blow, which costs, you know what I mean, or like paying 1 to sweeping blow, that's 2 cards now. You're down to 1 card left, and it's all done from there. And I think that Icelander can do more in this matchup now because of the presence and prevalence of those larger attacks. You saw that most of this game, MajiinBae is just deploying, Enlightened Strike, Scar for a Scar, these cards that, Armada's not incentivized to block really. He needs to keep the gas in the tank because he knows his risks going quite low. But if you're unable to preserve life against Icelander, and then she's able to disrupt you when you're at a critical life total, it's very, very hard to come back from that. So congratulations again to MajiinBae for taking out the victory again on Icelander. There are a number of Icelanders in our bracket, as you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen. It's definitely going to get frosty as we climb a little bit higher. And now MajiinBae will advance to take on the winner of Brody Spurlock. one of the hottest rising stars in flesh and blood globally, going up against Australia's favourite son, the tall Timmy, and of course his big team. So that's going to be a fantastic head-to-head matchup as well. I got to see tall Timmy playing a Pro Quest recently. I think he was in Sydney, and he did a great job on that Briar list. So that's going to be a great game as well, friend.
I'm not saying that Brody's short. But I think there's like I'm saying that tall Timmy is in fact like 7'7". Like it's obscene. So in terms of talent, there might be a gap, but in terms of actual physical size, that gap is equally as large potentially. Who knows? But ultimately, two really wholesome people. Tall Timmy of Australia, Brody Spurlock of the USA is one of the great matchups that I'm looking forward to. I'm a huge fan of Brody Spurlock. I'm a fan of anybody who is just a good person, and he is such a wholesome person out there, and I'm so glad that he's seeing the success, and here he is, the Goliath Gauntlet, and who knows? I have him winning the whole thing, frankly. That's just my little pick.
Yeah, I mean, not a crazy prediction to make at this point, I think, Flag. Very quickly, I want to take this opportunity to give a big shout out to FAB Cards, of course, with all your TCG needs. Thank you very much for getting on board with us here and putting up a massive prize pool. Really great to see the players rewarded for competing at the highest level like this. Of course, big shout out to Legend Story Studios for getting behind the Goliath once more with their prize support. And thanks to you for watching. Make sure if you have any feedback, comments, thoughts, questions, or anything like that, put it in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe here, of course, on youtube.com/983media, because there's much more of the Goliath Gauntlet coming your way tomorrow. A round of 16 continues with a couple of banger matchups. I won't spoil them for you. Stay tuned for those. We'll see you tomorrow.